Welcome back to the Life Midwest podcast. This is episode 7. I'm your host, Kevin, alongside Wes.
Hello.
Man, I'm telling you, sometimes you shift it over to him and you just never know what's going to come out of that mouth.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
We're playing a dangerous game here, folks. Hey, last week's topic, the decentralization of human society.
Yeah.
Is that what we called it?
Yeah. No, but not really. It was Decentralization Normal as the name of the episode. But the subject matter was, basically the decentralization of society, and kind of how technology is driving that and how we can counteract the negatives that might come from that.
We had a really good conversation about that, and Wes and I were walking away from that, and we went, gee, we are a social science podcast that started with the My Friend series, talking about our upbringings and the psychological ramifications of that. Are there any psychological ramifications to explore from Decentralization Normal?
Oh, tons of them.
Tons of them.
A lot, really. I mean,
some that you probably already know. You just don't. It's kind of like attribution error. You just didn't know it had a name.
Yeah, perhaps for some people. Yeah.
Can you give us an example, Wes?
Yeah. So maybe you're not like this, but some people, and I'm sure you've met people like this. Life might not be too great. But if there was a way to escape from the hassles, the trouble, the injustices and inequities of our current society, the current system in which governs us on the many different levels, it's really hard to escape from that. So if you were able to escape from that, imagine like just the relief you would feel. And not escape in a way that's like dangerous to your financial stability. Like, all right, F this shit, I'm out. Like, you can't just like leave your responsibility behind. Imagine there was an out, but there was no strings attached. And that's kind of what the decentralization is. It's you get to get out of this system. Of course, you're joining a new system, and there's systems in the transition, and you're always part of many systems. But the justice of it all, the inequity of it all, the fact that you are treated at a different level than people who, let's say, have built equity, have more wealth than you, and could potentially exploit you. Imagine you're free of that and how great that would feel and how less stressful life would be. That's just the most obvious one I could think of. But of course, there's the freedom of having everything at your fingertips. We kind of already have that from the internet. But let's say you want to make something. Let's say you want to move to an area that Amazon doesn't really ship to, overnight. Like, it's one of those places you'll get rural Alaska. Beautiful scenery. It might be too cold for some people, but, there's a lot of scenery there and a lot of back area, a lot of backwoods. It'd be a fun place to live and recluse to. So imagine if because of decentralized technologies, you're able to set up a life in a remote area without being trapped. What about in the case of, and this is speculation, I don't know when this will happen. I don't know if it even will happen. But people always talk about that big factor, that thing that's going to just break society. I think specifically of like a massive coronal ejection or like a massive solar flare that fries all of our electronics. Imagine if you're pretty much off the grid, have your own way to power your house. Let's say you have a mill on the water. Let's say you have a generator and you have all the machines to make those parts. You're going to be up sooner and running than someone that's in a grid system that has to have the government or the systems within the local government all the way up to the federal government come in and replace those systems. Just like the relief it would be to not have the stress of daily life, the stress of daily city life. Even if you don't live in a city, it's very much coming home to you. Like, you're living the same life as someone that lives in the city, 24-hour grocery stores, everything. You're on call for work all the time because you have a phone and an internet and you're expected to be there. It's hectic. So immediately what comes to mind is relief from the current struggles there's always struggles in any aspect of life, but not so many as the unjust ones that we have given the current situation.
But if we're in a place like you were saying, like a rural area in Alaska, going off of your example, you technically have control over how connected you are, right?
Yeah.
And is that the secret sauce? Is having the power to determine how connected or disconnected you are from the rest of the world?
I think it goes further than that. It's more like having the power to do whatever the hell you would like. Looking back at our video game episode, it's more like having the autonomy that you crave, because everyone does crave a level of autonomy. In the real world, there's circumstances that prevent you from being able to do the things you want to do. You have financial responsibilities. You have to go work a 9 to 5. You got to go work a job. And this isn't for everyone. Some people have been successfully decentralized and they're living amongst us, and that's cool. That's a step forward. But those living in that same system with the ones who are decentralized aren't able to experience that amount of freedom, that amount of autonomy to get up and say, I'm going to go spend this amount of money right now, not feel bad about it. And then after that, I'm going to take the day off and enjoy the thing I just bought. Money's not a problem here. I have myself covered. I can make whatever I want, build whatever I want, sell whatever I want because I have the means to production out of this system. So what you get is full autonomy that you would experience somewhat like in a video game. You're making goals that are happening. You're building equity off of your own time investment. You're doing these things that happen in real time and are trackable in real time and have real time rewards associated with them, or real world rewards associated with them.
I want to take a second and talk about the folks out there who are aware of the situation that they're in. They're aware of that cycle that they're trapped in. And full disclosure, this may not make a lot of sense if you haven't already listened to the previous episodes. So I would go back and do that first if for some reason you haven't. And maybe this will make more sense. But for the folks who are aware that they are a slave wage, kind of continuing on that conversation from last episode, they're stuck in that situation. They know, they are aware, they're just intelligent enough to where they realize that they are in that situation, and for whatever circumstantial reason, they're unable to get out of it. I'm thinking of the single mom who works 2 jobs, and so between those 2 jobs, she works 80 hours a week. She has to find time to feed and clothe herself and her children, and care for them and keep a roof over their head and do the motherly tasks in day-to-day life. I mean, for situations like her who are stuck within that cycle, that can be very, obviously from a cause and effect standpoint, I think we know how that goes. But from a psychological standpoint, I mean, how do you break that?
Unfortunately, and spoiler alert, a lot of people don't. It is a cyclical trap in which you are designed to kind of get stuck in. Like, sure, you can come across a circumstance. I guess I should probably first preface this by, it is much harder to be poor than it is to be rich. Let's look at it this way. If rich is a loose term here, I'm not going to put any type of specific monetary value. Rich is to whoever rich is.
It's whatever you perceive.
Right. In my example, it means you're allowed the financial hiatus. You don't have to worry about losing your house or going behind on rent if you take a day off work. So you have appointments to go to better yourself, job interviews, the time to look for jobs. You're able to spend all this extra time outside of your daily work task that make you money for financial stability to do the things you need to do. So back to your single mother example, which is quite perfect. because it's one of the more extreme examples, but also one of the examples that are very, very common that we see, day to day in our normal lives, but also reflected back to us through a television that naturally reflects society. If you're encumbered by the daily tasks of just surviving, that being spending your time to make money to live, as well as the mental strain that goes into that, constantly thinking about money, constantly thinking about finances. And there's a lot of studies a lot of research that has gone into this that shows people who make less money or under the poverty level or are constantly behind on bills perform worse in their jobs because they don't have the mental capacity at the end of the day to think about anything. They're stressed, they're tired, they're depressed.
All they can think about is surviving.
Surviving and where that next money's coming from. While doing that, you still have to, there's the social mobility aspect. You're still trying to climb that ladder out of the pits, but you just don't have the time to do those things. And when you do have the time, wouldn't you like to do something leisure-like? Wouldn't you like to actually enjoy this life that you've been thrown into against your will? And we look at this from a lot of different angles, like the ruling class, whoever you perceive that to be. You might have heard people say, oh, well, they're poor because they're lazy. And that's just not the truth. People work their ass off while in poverty to get out of poverty, and oftentimes, and unfortunately, sometimes remain in poverty their entire life. And the psychological aspects of that are not only obvious and clear, but one of the leading causes of why life keeps getting harder for us. If your customer service representative is one of these people and you have a bad interaction with them, well, their life was already hectic, messy, painful. They brought that to work with them, and now you're experiencing it. And now you have a bad perception of customer service representatives at maybe this one specific store. Maybe that person was a specific gender, race, or person of a certain quality that you deemed unworthy or didn't like. And now you have justification for why that type of person is like how they are. And it all kind of makes us angry and anxious, and we're all fighting each other. And it goes back into our episode about attribution. We didn't go into the reasons behind why we categorize people the way we categorize them, but we certainly do. And I think we would categorize people a lot harshly, or a lot less harshly, if we weren't stressed all the time. And the bottom percentage of people, the people who are stressed the most, weren't projecting that stress back. Because now the people who aren't as stressed as them are now taking on a little bit of their stress, and it all just travels. We can look at it kind of like physics, the law of supply and demand.
What Wes actually meant to say here was the law of conservation of energy.
You're not going to this stress just isn't magically going to disappear. It's going to go somewhere. You talk with a psychologist, they're taking on your burden of stress. Or a therapist, you talk with a good friend, you confide in a good friend your deepest issues. Now they're taking on a little bit of your stress. Feels good to get it off your chest, but you're just passing it around. We're not fixing the problems that actually affect our mental health, the problems that go into it, societal problems, what makes us anxious, what makes us fear and dread work the next day, why when we're home we can't stop thinking about the money and the work.
I'm going to say what I said last episode. This is not a life sucks and then you die episode.
Right. It's a life sucks, but we can have hope. And life doesn't suck. I mean, sure, there's times, right? But life doesn't suck. Life is just painful.
I think when you're doing a social sciences podcast, you're bound to really end up dissecting a lot of these darker topics and realist type of situations. And sometimes it's hard to sit here and say okay, here's the silver lining. We'll see you next week, folks. But you try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the silver lining to all of this is there's methods we can try as a country, as a society, as individual cultures, as states. We don't have to do it on the federal level even. Knowing how these society breaking issues are actively, disrupting society in real time in current times, we're able to then predict how that problem will get worse or how it will get better and what needs to be in place for that problem to get better. And there's no way we're hiding these problems anymore. The internet is here. It's been here. It's so here that like 4-year-olds are using it. You can't hide much when a lot of technical or technology savvy people start getting together. And so far that's like anyone under the age of 35, 40. We have information at our fingertips.
Listen, folks, we don't use this word lightly on this podcast, but I'm going to tell you something. And if we ever get to a point where we do merch, this is probably going to be one of the first t-shirts that we put out there. And here it is. The internet does whatever the fuck it wants. Let's say that one more time for the back. The internet does whatever the fuck it wants. If you look back to a few weeks ago, you just saw a bunch of nobody Reddit users almost take down a company, like a publicly bought and sold and traded company. Because the internet doesn't, you can't, like Wes is saying, you can't hide. Give me a nod here if I'm right. You can't hide things. The internet is like the opposite of quicksand. Everything will surface eventually, including when you have billions of dollars in short hedge funds invested into a company. Everything comes out eventually. Yeah. Sometimes it's not always true. Sometimes it's about Kanye West and Jeffree Star getting together, and that's why him and Kim Kardashian are getting a divorce.
Oh, that's hot.
Like, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm definitely going to bring my critical thinking and skepticism along to evaluating that. But I'm telling you, the internet can do whatever it wants. Think about how much unity there was over the Bernie Sanders meme earlier in January. Not even earlier in January, just on Inauguration Day. My dad, who is of a very specific nature of political spectrum, found that hilarious, and it warms my heart that he found it hilarious. If 2020 has been the year that it's been, I feel like 2021 is on its way to being like unity and like F the system and all of that. I feel like that's where it's going.
There used to be a pretty, I guess familiar, like it was in a song, and I feel bad because I don't remember the name of the song, but like it's the revolution will not be televised. And that's just not the truth anymore. Back during the Vietnam War, they were televising these wounded soldiers coming home, and the people were pissed. No wonder. Like, this is what's happening over there. We're in some war we don't belong in, and we're losing. Yikes. And then we get to see the torture and pain that these people are going through coming home. Well, they don't televise that anymore. Do you see soldiers from the Middle East, or soldiers from Africa, or soldiers stationed in Southeastern Asia coming home like in parade style, or like the wounded coming home in caskets? We don't see that anymore on the television. Where we see that is the internet. Now the revolution is televised, but it's not on the TV. It's on your computer screen.
I was going to say, I while I agree with the sentiment, it's metaphorical, right? The internet is now your television. Think about how easy it is for us to cut cable. You know what I mean? Like, cutting cable is like the new keto diet. Like, oh yeah, Jill and I cut cable last week. Best thing we ever did. Now we just have insert product here. I don't want to get any free sponsors here, but it's the internet. It's all about the internet.
And in our last episode, episode 6 from last week, we talked about converging technologies. The internet's just converging media. There was the .com era where companies were just kind of playing with the internet. Before that, it was just universities and the military. And then we got into, so that was the web. That was the World Wide Web. Now we're at Web 2.0. That's social media, because all of it's media. Television's on the internet. Radio's on the internet. Podcasts are on the internet. YouTube is its own form of media. We have social media such as Facebook, Twitter. We have all these platforms to consume media on the internet. Like, even when you're watching YouTube on your TV, you're still on the internet. What you're doing is in real time witnessing what was once different forms of media converged into a single platform. So that goes into the converging technologies and decentralization as well. You're now decentralized from a cable package. I suspect entropy will have its way in all of this, in that you'll just have to buy streaming packages that are literally just a cable subscription.
I mean, it's already happening. I mean, there's services where you have to pay extra for Stars or HBO or whatever. They're not just included. It's not as bad. It's not nearly as bad, but it's definitely there. Wes, I also think about news apps. I think about how news apps are like a convergence of media too. I feel like when our parents were in their 30s or in their older adolescence, they picked that one source that they got their news from, and that was it. We have that advantageous aspect of, if we want to, we can use Google News, Apple News, whatever we want, and it's this convergence of news stories from different news outlets. And I feel like that's a real advantage that we have that previous generations didn't.
Right. So like news aggregates, media aggregates. YouTube's a great example of that. Like, I know you're talking about like the news apps, like you go to Reddit, for example, an aggregate of news. Basically, people post stories they find relevant and talk about them in the comments. Facebook does it. Twitter, not so much, because it's its own type of platform. But people do share news on it, but not like the way we see on, Reddit or Facebook.
Right.
But yeah, aggregate sites, that's converging media too. We're using algorithms and AI to feed news to you that's relevant to you, but also as you interact with the news, like, that's not relevant to me, or you don't click on something, you see less of that. So like, convergent media is just what we have right now. You could endlessly play the devil's advocate on this one, and you would eventually end up at the conclusion that it's all just the same form of media.
You're not saying that at the end of the day, all media is the same, though, right?
The platform's important, but the content's pretty much all the same. So think about it this way. Dick Fitzwell, just a random person, some guy I've probably met somewhere, post on Twitter, LOL, had fun night tonight, but they're a celebrity with no context. So you're like, well, what did that celebrity do? So a news outlet cross-posts that Twitter and then makes a video about it. Breaking news, celebrity Dick Fitzwell had a good night, but what were they doing? And then that news video gets reposted on Reddit. You see how we're still on the same platform here? Mm-hmm. They're all individual platforms within that. So like, obviously there's the tenet or like kind of main rule in media, or when studying media, and it's the platform is the message. So in Twitter, you have a limit, 142 characters, I think. Something like that.
Sounds about right, yeah.
So the median being the message is your message is fine-tuned to which media or which platform you're posting it to. Obviously, Facebook, you can post a several paragraph rant. Twitter, you cannot do that. You also don't want to necessarily post a video to Twitter like as your Twitter page. You want to have those quippy short liners. Like, that's what it's for. So YouTube, you would then post the video. So the platform, or the median is the message, is very true, but it's all the same platform, and every message will go through every platform on there told a different way. It's all just the internet at this point. It's Web 2.0. It's social media. We're now using media socially.
And circle this back to decentralization. Is that in essence what, is happening with Web 2.0? Is there is no centralization of it. It's just there, and almost in a not trying to sound ominous about it, but in a way, it's just everywhere.
Yeah, the internet is omnipresent. It's literally everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Even these days, the most remote parts of the world is getting it. I don't think it ties into decentralization as well as I would like it to, or we would like it to. Since we're basically episode 2 of decentralization, it should fit a little bit better. The internet is actually very centralized, in my opinion. The sources are all decentralized because it's not like the Chinese internet, for example, where it's monitored by the government and you have one source of information trickling down to like everyone. We have multiple sources going in, and you can turn off one web page and go to another for a whole different mean. But the internet itself is the centralization. In the internet, you can't escape from the capitalist or the pirates who will try to scam you, sell you fake news, sell you fake products. How many times have you opened up a YouTube video? Hey, you fat ass, you want to get ripped like me?
How many Instagram advertisements have you seen for real AirPods, but they're only $40?
Right. So you can't escape that because it's centralized all to one location. You're going to run into everything on the internet because everyone's using that to get their message out, because that is the central form of communication. It's Web 2.0, it's convergent media, all centralized into one area.
So it's converged media, it's decentralized in a way, but it's also centralized in a way.
Right. The information is centralized to the internet these days. Sure, you can, just like you were explaining in the last episode about the connectivity or the internet of things, basically, having your different devices for everything, you're now decentralizing where your focus has to be in order to do the same task. With the internet, do you have another internet to go to?
No, I can't say that I do.
You just got that one internet, no real options. You can make your own intranet, but like you're only talking to yourself at that point. Sup me, sell 5. It's not a real alternative. So while the information is decentralized, meaning you're not getting it from one source and only one source, and they're the grand authority on it, you're getting everything on the internet, but it's all right there. That's your internet. What if you wanted internet that banned the advertisement of anything? Like, basically, this is the open source internet, no advertising here. We're free, open source, no monetization. And someone lays their own line of cables, creates their own infrastructure for it, and creates an alternative internet. That would be closer to decentralization, I feel. That second internet would literally just become populated with capitalists and pirates, unless we had some type of rule saying that couldn't happen, because people smart. They're like, how can I make $1 today? And then they go harass the second internet.
So I want to pivot back to what we were talking about earlier. And we were just talking about how we are in a state, in an age where we have more information than we've ever had, and more access to any more information than we've ever had. So these people who are in this wage slave category have access to all of this information, but no time to access it. How psychologically damaging do you think that is?
It's hard to give like an exact answer here, but I would assume the damage that would come from it would be later on. So there's all this information out there. Of course, you're a smart person. I think everyone has the capability of being a smart and knowledgeable person. So let's just look at like the worst example of what we would assume to be a smart person. That person's smart enough to know their situation and lot, right? Or their lot in life. So like maybe you don't know all this information on the internet, but I think what would be more tragic is if you do have the time to access the internet and all this information is just spoon-fed to you through these media aggregates. You know, you flip to the right on your phone or whatever instead of the left, or vice versa. And you have news. So at your fingertips, everyone has a phone, most people. Regardless of how poor you are, you probably have some type of phone with news on it. And imagine knowing what's going on, all these problems in the world, the fact that you are effectively a wage slave or effectively owned by the elite, and that your country doesn't necessarily look out for your best interest. Yet you have to live a normal life within this society, or you're going to fall down to the pits. If you let depression get the best of you, you can't work, you can't provide for yourself, you might end up homeless, your children might starve. There's all these things you think about, which I think would be much worse if you knew the situation and you know just nothing's getting done about it, as opposed to not knowing about the situation.
Does that mean that ignorance really is bliss?
Not necessarily. Imagine you're not able to identify why your life is such a mess. What if, shit just keeps going wrong, one thing after another, but you take the ignorance is bliss approach? Do you acknowledge your troubles as some form of agency you can't explain?
I don't know. I just feel like if I was less aware of my problems, I feel like I'd be happier. And maybe that's a false attribution, but I don't know. I think about the things that I deal with in my daily life, and I'm like, man, if only I just didn't know any better, then nobody could fault me, and it would be somebody else's problem.
I'm assuming you've met people who are completely less informed than you.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've met people in that category who are miserable.
Absolutely.
Have we answered your question?
No, just kidding. Yes, you have. Yeah, they're miserable, but they just don't know why, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I don't think ignorance is bliss. I think there is strife from either direction. So life is going to be hard if life's going to be hard. I think you would experience a lot of cognitive dissonance in performing activities that help maintain the status quo, knowing what's wrong with it. And sometimes that can be extremely difficult. Your job might require you, as part of your presentation of company culture, or how you present yourself as an employee of that company, to repeat things that just aren't true. It's corporate jargon that makes the situation seem wonderful. And then you experience the backlash from yourself every time you do that. So you get the depression, you feel bad about it, you don't want to do it anymore, you get anxiety about having to do it because you know it's wrong, you're perpetuating a system. And if you just don't know about it, it's probably going to start pissing you off that all these people around you are telling you you're wrong all the time. We can look at the boomers versus the millennials. The boomers are a prime example of people who didn't have this information accessible. The boomers have it, and now they're a bunch of smartasses in the eyes of the boomers, and they're like, you millennials don't know anything important, you just know your gosh darn video games. And the kids are like, well, that would be great and all, but like our government's screwing us and you don't seem to care about that because you're too dumb or whatever. So everyone's, I think, like I said from the beginning, strife from both ends, definitely. I think if the situation is bad, whether you know about it or don't know about it, there's going to be struggles and things that really, ruin your attitude, the way you think.
You just may be able to pinpoint it better than others, or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming up, can we save those who can't save themselves? Can we help those who can't help themselves? Find out after the break. Welcome back to the Life Midwest podcast. It's your buddy Kevin and Wes here on the other side of the break. Hey, if you're looking for ways to support us, if you're not already sick of me talking about it, we do have a Patreon.
Ooh, what's that called?
What's the Patreon called? I believe it's at the Life Midwest.
Simple, right? That's
Pretty
awesome.
simple, right? It's just like
that.
our socials at the Life Midwest on your favorite platform. You know what we would really appreciate the most, though, is some reviews.
Or even like emails telling us that we said something wrong. Love that stuff.
Or right, if you actually enjoyed it. Support at thelifemidwest.com. You can also reach out to any of our socials, like I said, at the Life Midwest. Leave us a review. Make sure you subscribe. Right? Get those notifications on your favorite listening platform, whether you're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Anchor, Amazon, any of the ones that we haven't heard of or mentioned. There are some out there that we're on, and we had no idea.
Yeah.
But we're grateful for you if you're listening to us on that platform.
RSS feeds are weird. We'll just show up places. So if you're listening to us on a unique platform that we don't talk about, send us an email so we know about that.
To our listeners in Ireland and the UK, I have no idea how you found us, but we're glad you're here.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It may be on one of those apps that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
That we're not aware of.
Maybe send us an email and let us know.
We'll be awaiting your message in a bottle. Wes, I want to talk before we get to the end of this episode too quickly. I want to spend some time and talk about again with in terms of psychology of those affected by being a slave wage, or being a part of this ever evolving and ever shifting society into a more decentralized world. And we talked earlier about the single mom who works 2 jobs, who just doesn't have, I don't know. I don't want to sit here and say it doesn't have the time, because I'm a critical thinker. I know how the opposing side is going to view this, and they're going to say, "Oh, that person needs time management skills." But you need time to teach time management.
You also need time to be able to manage it.
And you have to have time to be able to educate yourself. Imagine having access to these infinite number of resources, like we said earlier, and not being able to delve into those resources. You have to learn about time management. You can't do that if you don't have time. It's a catch-22. It's no different than if you have a job, right? Or if you're applying for a job and they want you to have experience. Well, they're not going to hire you if you don't have experience, but you need someone to hire you so that you can have that experience. How do we end that cycle? How do we help those who are in a position to where they can't help themselves, Wes?
How can we help people who cannot help themselves?
And I'm not talking about the ones who won't help themselves. The ones who victimize themselves and say, "Oh, woe is me," and they don't want that path out. They don't want that way out because it's comfortable to sit there and sulk. I'm talking about the ones who want to find a way out and they can't.
I guess before we get into that, I have to play the devil's advocate here. How do we discern whether someone chooses to not find a way out or someone who really cannot get a way out?
I think you have to act in good faith.
So then everyone can't find a way out, as opposed to some people choose not to find a way out. I'm not as naive to believe that. In my life, even in the past, I have definitely just been like, nope, I'm good here until something better comes along, even though I did not like my situation. So I know it exists.
It absolutely exists, but there's definitely a group of people who want a way out. And I think that if you tried to help those who don't want a way out and they're comfortable with where they're at, I think they will find a way or a reason to say, you know what? This is just too much, or this isn't for me. I'm gonna wait till something else comes along.
Welcome back to the Debate Midwest, where Wes disagrees with how Kevin is approaching this. I don't think we're able to discern that, nor like we're attributing again with that example. They just don't want a way out because they rebutted with, oh, this, or this. That could be a part of their anxiety. It could be a part of like their knowledge deficit. It could be a part of like It could be that they just don't specifically want your help because you're approaching them wrong. I've had people who I'm like, oh, this person could use my help. I'm knowledgeable in this subject. And they push me away. And I'm like, okay, I guess some people just don't want to be helped. But then I learned later that someone else was able to help them with pretty much the exact same stuff I was telling them. But they felt more comfortable following that person's advice than mine.
But at the end of the day, you acted in good faith. And I guess that's my point, is knowing that you acted in good faith and that you, whether it was the help that person needed or not, you gave that person the benefit of the doubt. You assumed positive intent. You assumed that they wanted help for the right reasons because they wanted a way out and they couldn't figure it out themselves. One of our mission state pillars is that all humans are good if given the right tools.
Yeah.
I just want to give those humans the right tools if I have the power to do that.
I think quite literally what we're doing with this podcast is what you just asked. How can we help people, give them tools to find ways out of situations? We've taught people about empathy and how your neighbor is not your enemy. We've taught people about how other people kind of categorize the events that happen around them and how you're a subject of that and also part of that and how you attribute as well. We've talked about video games and why people are doing that. I think we're arming people with knowledge. This is just what I like. So the podcast itself is a good example of how I've decided I want to help people. And podcast is a good way because you can reach a lot of people at once. But really, what would you like? You really just listen to problems of the people around you, right? You listen to them, you offer them the ear that you would want them to offer you, and then you offer solutions. You don't tell someone, hey, I'm going to fix you. You say, oh, well, hey, have you thought of it from this angle? Is there anything I can do to help? And if they say, no, there's nothing, I'm just so glad you talked to me, I think you've helped that person. And offering your input is just another data point for them. Right, so if you have few data points to make an assumption off of, few data points to make a hypothesis off of, you can then acquire more by experiencing new situations. Different people telling you their side of the story. And somewhere in between there, you can synthesize what you believe to be reality. And that might change your mentality by just meeting the right person. I think just caring about people is the root of all of it. It's understanding that people are just people. You're a person. You could be at your worst. You could be at your best. But just because you're at your best and someone else is at their worst doesn't mean you're better than them. It means you're at a different place. And knowing that, I think that's what has inspired me to actively want to teach people what I know for not only my benefit, having people around me that are knowledgeable and able to affect change with me, but also for their benefit, because I think at the end of the day, if other people are looking out for your best interest, you'll probably start looking out for others, and it's just a better system than F my neighbor, F my whatever. I don't know that guy down the road. You can go eat a dick. Like, sure, some of that stuff's fun to say, but like, in reality, while I don't know that neighbor, I hope that they're just as knowledgeable as me, just as capable as me, and at the end of the world, when the apocalypse happens, they can help me erect a fence or whatever. So back to your question, what do you do for people who need the help? Maybe they don't know they need the help, or maybe they don't even want the help, but how do you approach them? Just be a friend. Be there for them. And teach them anything you know. Don't assert your knowledge. Don't be like, oh, I know it this way because that way. Like, if you realistically know something, you know a skill, you know a trade, you're a auto mechanic, teach a friend how to do that. Someone who's really down on their luck doesn't have a job. Well, I can teach you how to fix a car. Something like that. Give them the skills so that at the end of the day, when they're feeling helpless and hopeless, they now have something to rely on to make money.
And I really like that, because you don't even have to spend time or effort seeking out people that need helped. You're not some superhero that's looking for danger or a damsel in distress, right? You're just going out and you're going, okay, today I'm going to be kind to as many people as possible. And I might befriend some folks along the way. And maybe I can benefit those people. Maybe those people benefit me back in some way. Or at least make me feel better about myself, or make me feel good about myself because I know I did something good in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at that. Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I just got out of what you were saying. So I think that, you know, as hard as that can be to do sometimes, especially in a very polarized and not so united point in our country's timeline, no one's ever going to shoot down kindness. As long as it's coming from a good place, don't fake kindness. Some people can see that. Some people can see that a mile away.
Absolutely.
Genuine kindness. I sat down, Ashley and I had our really nice dinner a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, obviously tensions are high, and, you know, we live in a swing state, and, you know, our corner of the state is very, very high risk for COVID right now. And I won't lie, there were some false attributions on our part, but we had dinner at this really, really lovely hibachi place. And we were at a table, and there were two gentlemen across from us. And the way they talked, the way they acted, it seemed like they might have had a different view on wearing masks. And we ended up having really great table talk with them. And I think that sometimes when you put those biases aside, or when you put those false attributions aside, you can really teach someone something. Just like Wes is saying, like people can walk away learning something from that and going, wow, like that was actually a decent interaction with another human being. If you're anything like me and you loathe interacting with society because you have this undying fear that something's going to go south or something's going to go bad, and then it doesn't, man, people like me need that. And I know I'm not the only one. So I guess my point with this is that, yeah, if you just go out and you just be kind to people, you don't have to try to be friends with everyone and exchange phone numbers. That's just kind of weird. When you go out to a restaurant, don't leave your phone number on the receipt.
But what if she was cute?
I'm not having that debate here, though, man. I'm just saying, you know, just be genuinely kind and just want to help other people. And I think that you aren't going to always know whether you changed that person's life or not. I think I touched on that on one of the My Friends series episodes, is that you don't know if you're that person for somebody or not. You're not always going to find out. You're not always going to have the gift of finding out, and that's okay. It's about giving people the benefit of the doubt, having good faith that good karma will come around to you. Not being good, though, because you expect good karma, but just being kind and good to others because you are an empathetic person. And you are everyone else at some point in your life. Wes, before we wrap up here, this has been really great to kind of expand on such a deep diving topic like decentralization, and there's so many pillars. Honestly, we could have done an entire episode on human labor. We could have done an episode on technology, on psychology. I'm glad we were able to kind of meld all of these legs into 2 episodes. But is there anything that you wanted to kind of throw in here that we didn't really talk about today, or that we didn't get to talk about last week?
This is all for the benefit of, at the end of the day, this is all for the benefit of ourselves. We can look at this as transactional even. So that sounds really selfish, but you will benefit more if your neighbors are happy, healthy, and friendly. Same as they'll benefit more if you're happy, healthy, and friendly. And we don't get to that point by fighting with each other all the time. And we don't get to that point by letting things go by unchecked. We have the technology at our fingertips. We're all social on the internet. And the revolution is televised on the internet these days. So what we're able to do is all get together and work as first a community, maybe a family even before that. Work as a family, work as a community, work as a city, work as a state, work as a nation, to make sure that over the next decade, and then the decade after the next decade, and, you know, for infinity, generation after generation, for ourselves and our posterity, create a more positive and nurturing environment for citizens, i.e. us, to do wonderful things on the world scale. And our government only has to benefit from that. We don't live in like a authoritarian unilateral government. The way it's built is a lot of majorities that make up that government really want to see the best for us. And the more we get active in just talking about what it means to live in a democracy, what the future holds, what technology will bring, all the things that have happened in history are going to happen again, and we're living through it. What's great is we now get to see it happen in real time online, in our social media. I just want to affect positive change within my community, and then within my city, and then within my state, and so on. And decentralization is going to happen. Maybe not decentralization in the laissez-faire approach, like government gets its hands off decentralization, libertarianism, but it's definitely going to happen because of technology. And even if it's not met by the government coming in and saying, let's make sure these people who have lost their jobs to automation are taken care of, it's going to happen one way or another. It's just who will win out. Is it going to be the people who win, or is it going to be the money and the elite who win? And keep in mind, the elite are very, very few. The top 1%, like there was a whole thing about that, a decade ago? It hasn't changed. This year alone, 5 individuals made collectively $1 trillion because money travels upward. Decentralization will happen. It's how will we meet it? How will our government meet it? And how together can we build off that to be actually, for once, in how long, the greatest nation in the world?
Incredibly well put, Wes. Really, truly. So if somebody wants to impact change, aside from what we just talked about, is there a next level? Is there, I mean, because I'm sitting here thinking, man, then you just go for municipal and local governments and representatives for that kind of change, right?
Yeah, it starts with education, though, right?
Starts with education.
You can't effectively govern the people if you don't understand everything that goes into it. And since we live in a democracy, we are the government, technically. If you don't like who's in charge, run a smear campaign against them, get them thrown out, and get in there yourself. I'm not advocating running smear campaigns, but, like, it's an option. I think the next step is, talk with a representative. If your representative's an asshole, call them every single day. Ruin their lives. That's what they're there for. They're there to serve you, actually.
They're not your boss. You are their boss.
For once, yes. The power can be, like, we're meant to be decentralized in that manner. A true democracy is decentralized. The power rests in the people. And luckily, while that's not the decentralization we're talking about, we have that ability here in the U.S. And most countries that have followed that model have that. So learn your stuff. Maybe learn it deeper. Maybe learn it even deeper. Go out, tell people, tell your neighbors about it. Again, don't be self-righteous. Don't be overzealous. Don't get mad at them because they won't listen to you. Have just good conversations with them. That's really all you need to do. The next step would be going to become a representative. And the next step after that, I mean, there's no limit. As long as you were born here, you can be the president. Even if you weren't born here, you can be the president. Remember episode 1 of Decentralization? Alexander Hamilton wasn't born in the United States. I know there's a law now, but, you know, historically, you know, George Washington wasn't born here. Maybe he was. I don't actually know.
We'll just have to leave it on that mystery for you folks to find out.
We're not revisiting that.
We're not revisiting it. Folks, next week we're going to be taking a trip back to the My Friend series. We're going to have special guest local radio personality Peapod on the show here, talking about his life, his upbringing, and how he thinks it's impacted him and made him the way he think. We'll probably also talk about his podcast because he has one too.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's really going to be a real treat. Make sure you tune in next week, folks. Like I said, hit us out at our socials at The Life Midwest. Email us if you got something to say. Support at The Life Midwest. Throw us a couple of reviews. Subscribe wherever you're at. We really appreciate hearing from you, and we appreciate all the love early on in this journey here. We'll see you next week, though, folks.
Deuces.
Bye-bye.